Hey, welcome back to the Advisor's Compass. I'm Chuck Downs. I'm here with Andy Schwartz, and each month we sit down and have the real conversations that advisors are having around growth, scale, and clarity. And so if you're an advisor and you want to grow faster, scale smarter, and build what lasts, you are in the right place. Andy, how are you?
I'm great, Chuck. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. It's good to see you and excited to share another episode here. Why don't we start out? One of our listeners, Tom, sent in a question, and it was around lead advisors. And the question, if I recall correctly, is how do you make that transition from being the advisor to handing off that relationship to a lead advisor? And his question was around how do you do it without pissing the clients off and without alienating them and feeling like they're no longer important?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that, I struggled with several years ago. How do I, you know, um, get help from a lead advisor with clients that maybe, I don't want to say aren't big enough for me to work with, but maybe I have to, like everybody else, segment my client base and be spending more time with A clients and less time with, say, B and C clients. But at the same time, we don't want to offend them. There's revenue associated with these people. We love these people. So the question is, how do we do that gracefully? How do we do that and win for everybody? Great question. What I would say first is what we have to be focused on selling, if you will, explain to clients is it's about team. Okay, we never want it to be just about us for a whole bunch of reasons, obviously, and we'll talk a little bit about later on the idea of valuation, our practice value, and whether we have these things set up or not. Because clearly, if it's a team and not an individual, then our valuation is much better. It's much higher. The practice is more valuable. So I'm going to talk first as a more senior advisor, regretfully, because I am a senior advisor. Um, so I'm at a point now, and when I brought I've had some lead advisors over the last couple of years, but I've really embraced the idea that I need to really turn over a big segment of my book. $5 million files, $10 million files, because I find myself now as CEO of one point, partners that, I've got a lot of responsibilities also, with running the firm, and there's only so many hours in the day. But at the same time, though, I think it's really important whether you're in a situation like I'm in and you're running a large organization or you're running a small organization. I think that the differentiating factor for us is that, our CEO, myself, is still day to day, daily engaged with clients. I can't talk to 12 clients a day like I used to, but I want to be engaged. I think it's really important because we stay in touch with this business. We understand, how our businesses are operating. I always say that one of the advantages we have is if there's a problem in the firm, I know about it first because I probably got to the office a little bit before everybody else, and I've already experienced whatever the pain is. And I think that's important. So with that said, I think that I brought on a young lady in the last 18 months. So what are we looking for first? I think if it's a lead advisor, and there's two different, avenues here. I'm not talking about the advisor we're trying to bring on to find money for us, because hunters are different from service advisors. And you have to make a decision and be clear about what it is you're looking for, or you're going to set yourself up for failure. I didn't need a hunter because I can find money. I've always been able to find money. What I needed was a true service advisor, lead advisor, or a pair of lead advisors, which I have a pair. And so what I'm looking for is first people that are very, very detail oriented, people that listen. They're not, talk, sales, because these people don't need to be sold. They need to be serviced. I need people that have great follow-up skills. But I also want people that have a good understanding about planning and investments. So a CFP for me is a really good idea. Someone with really good experience. Alexis, who is working with me with my highest, biggest clients, 8 years at Morgan Stanley. We actually brought her on to work and run our alts department here first. And she was so fantastic. And because I poached her. Now I brought her in, so I felt less guilty about poaching her, but nonetheless, I poached her because one, she's really, really smart. She's got great experience, and she's very, very good with follow-up. She's meticulous. And the conversation that I had with clients as they introduced her was, I want to introduce you to Alexis, Miller. Alexis has been on our team for the last year. I brought Alexis on to run our alts desk, and she was so fantastic that I brought her onto my team. The reason I'm doing this is, and now again, if you're 55, 60, 65, this will work from a conversation. The reason I'm doing this, Chuck, is because it doesn't make me feel good, but clients keep asking me, Andy, what happens if something happens to you? And I keep looking around, why do people keep asking me that? I'm only 64. But the reality is that as we get into our 60s or even our late 50s, clients know two things. Anything can happen to anybody. And the older we are, the more likely something could happen. And the other is that if we are successful, they know that we're successful and that we're not going to work till we're, 80 years old. And so I basically kind of sort of bridged this conversation by saying that, as clients were asking, and I brought Alexis on for two reasons. One, it's sort of an insurance policy, because not only do I want to make sure that I can guarantee continuity for you and to be able to take care of you for the rest of your life, I want to be able to take care of your kids. And we cannot take care of your kids. I cannot take care of your children, 40 years from now, because 40 years from now, I'm going to be 104 years old. I probably won't be here, but even if I were, you wouldn't be taking care of your kids. So the idea is, Alexis is here to make sure that the firm can guarantee that continuity. Also, she's here because she's smarter than me, and we want to continue to provide the best possible service. Now, I'm not going anywhere, and our process has been, because I think one of the questions was, well, how does this transition work? It's not like I have one appointment and I say, Chuck, meet your new advisor, meet your new service person. But if you ever need me, call me. That's not how it works. She's been on calls with me, all of my calls, for the last 12 months. And then what's starting to happen now is now that people are used to seeing her, and again, these aren't $1 million and $2 million accounts, because I've given those counts, to my other service advisor, long ago. So I don't work those files. These are my 3s to 100. And the reality is that now we're at a point where I'll probably continue to stay on all of the files above 20 million, let's say. But like, I've got to be in Florida for an acquisition, conversation on Monday. And so, but we had a full schedule, and it was sort of a last minute thing I have to do. We're not going to cancel the schedule. She's already been on 3 different calls with all these people. She's very, very good. And she'll handle the call. She'll just say that Andy got called away, that he had to be out of town. We didn't want to cancel you. And she'll go through the numbers. I might pop up the second one. The process will be is that I'm on all the calls for the first year or so, depending on how it's going. Assuming it's going well, then I'll disappear for a call. Then I'll come back for a call. Then I might disappear for 2 calls. What I don't want, and I don't think it's to your benefit, if it's a client that would bother you if you lost them, you don't want to necessarily lose touch with them. And there's a bunch of reasons why you don't. And look, we don't want to become zoo-fed bears. I think part of the problem is that this, in my mind, this isn't an opportunity to not work anymore. This is an opportunity to be able to spend time growing bigger clients, doing things that, hopefully will be more productive. But it's not to not work. I could hire her and another, and I've got 3, and I could show up on Wednesdays, I guess. But I don't think it's a very good idea. And I don't think, it's not going to grow my practice, and probably will have some defection. And also, I don't necessarily want to become 100% dependent, because there's always the risk of whose client is it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So for the older advisor who there is retirement in the next 10 years, these people are here to ensure and to guarantee continuity in the event of a death or retirement, so that we can take care of you, and we want to take care of your kids, and we want to be multi-generational. And so we've got to set up for that. Initially, it's always a struggle, but what I'm finding is I think my older clients, they're relieved by this, because they're older and they think this way, and they're in the back of their mind, whether they've really processed it or not. There's always that thought, like, when is this guy going to punch out? We know he's successful. He's probably has enough money to retire. What if something happened to him? So I think that they love the idea that we are thinking forward, and they love the idea that we're here to take care of their children. So to me, this has not been a negative. I don't think it's an idea that people feel like they're being abandoned. I think it's kind of the opposite. I think they feel like we're being thoughtful, about the process, that we're respecting the idea of reality, and that we want to make sure. And again, it's always about the team. It's Paul, it's Danny, it's Alexis, it's Tyler, it's the team, and the team all stays the same. And I'm always here, when you need me. So, but again, we're not handing off one appointment. See it. It's been real. It's a process. It's a process. What we also do is whenever there's follow up during that process, I always let her follow up. So if there's something that needs to be done, we need information, we need something, I want them to get used to talking to her. And so where my chief of staff used to do a lot of that follow up, I let her do that follow up. The client says, hey, could you send me a copy of what we did today? We need some more information, whatever it is, she follows up. And so they're getting used to working with her. But again, what we're looking for in that role is not a salesperson. We don't need a salesperson. At least I don't need a salesperson. I'm looking for a service person, different personality, detail, follow up, thoughtful, not disorganized sales, great conversation. They're different personalities.
So there's a lot to unpack there. I guess one question I would have is when you're thinking about it at your stage, and so let's take any successful advisor over the age of 50 or 55.
Yeah.
So they're looking at it from a standpoint of service and continuity and transition or
Yeah,
succession
succession.
planning.
Sure.
And then the younger successful advisor, would they be looking, I guess one question would be, are they maybe more looking for someone to grow it and be able to sell their existing? Do you see a difference there between the salesperson versus the service person, depending upon where you are, what age, what stage?
Yeah. So if I understand the question, so we talked about the idea of the service advisor. What does the AUM growth second gen advisor look like? It's a different skill set. If you can find the advisor that maybe they couldn't build a business big enough, or they didn't have the support to be able to go out and close the business, but they're very good at the activity gathering and getting in front of people, that's a different advisor. So if you have to have the team to support that, so you're going to have that service advisor probably, involved in that, because someone's going to have to, deal with these people after, they're brought in. The compensation's different. In a way, they could be more valuable, but they're harder to find. It's harder to find that next gen that can actually make great. And the problem with that advisor is that if once they start to really bring in assets, one, they think that they're their clients. So even though they're on salary from me and my whole team supports them, because trust me, I've been there. I learned the hard way. But what ends up happening is they still think that even though they were basically building a business in your book with your clients or your clients' referrals, in the end, they think they're their clients and they think that they're the builder. And then there's always that risk, so, and we can talk about that later too. Like, how do you protect yourself from that risk? But I would say that we compensate them differently. And look, people, I'm a builder. I'm an advisor. I'm a growth oriented advisor. So for me, that was never my approach. If you're running an RIA where you're more building a business and you're more operating at the business level, but you don't necessarily want to be the hands-on advisor, then you might be looking for, the hunters, and just recognize that they're two different personalities or two different skill sets. And you've got to match up the support, for those hunters so that you can maintain that, that business once it comes on. And then that's a team. Then you talk about a team. The hunter hunts, they introduce the team, the on the closes, even on the open or on the second and third and fourth appointments, the service advisor is there. And then the hunter goes on to hunt, another day.
So two different ones, service advisor versus the hunter lead or second gen. Is that what I heard you saying?
Yes.
And how would you suggest advisors, what questions should they ask themselves, or how should they look at their business to determine, am I hiring a service advisor or a hunter, a lead gen?
Yeah. I mean, I think that if you're an advisor that does not have difficulty finding money, you just need more time. And it doesn't make sense to be talking to a $500,000 file or $1 million client or even a $2 million client, because you can go out and find $5 million clients. Then what you need is you need to build a service team. If you're more interested in figuring out what the next technology, software that your firm should have, or, you're more interested in doing the financing and, in all the things that operate the business, I have people that do all that. So that's not necessarily my interest. I try to lead by example, but I also enjoy the engagement with clients, and I have the ability to find money. So I think that that's a safer, more profitable way to build a practice. I think what a lot of advisors are looking for is they're looking for the silver bullet where, finding money is hard. Organic growth is hard. Prospecting, calling people, it's more of a hustle. It can be a grind, I guess, for people. We're all looking for that. How can I just hire some people, pay them, and let them bring in all the money? And I can just sort of be the closer and be the boss. Some people maybe can do that, but I think that that's very, very difficult to find. And then what you find is you become at the mercy of the hunters, because the hunting is the more valuable. The people that can bring in the assets are much more valuable than everybody else. And trust me, they figure it out. I mean, it is amazing how ungrateful that second gen, advisor can be, because I've experienced it. Very ungrateful, very delusional, and have no problem walking out after a number of years, after you've paid them very, very well, and take whatever they can take, because that's just the world. And there's plenty of institutions out there that will pay them, on those assets. And so, to me, the safest, way to keep a practice and protect a practice is to have the people servicing it and continue to be involved in that practice, be involved in the relationships you really care about. But most importantly, have the ability to hunt, so.
And Andy, how would you, I guess two questions here. How would you protect yourself going forward, or how do you protect
Yeah.
yourself going forward from losing someone?
Yeah.
And then the second part of that would be, how do you compensate that person?
Yeah.
A lot of advisors I know that I speak to, they'll hire someone and maybe they're kind of hunting, but as you've alluded to, they're hunting in the zoo. They
Yeah.
think they're hunting, but they're
Right.
really hunting in the zoo.
Yeah.
And so they're managing existing relationships that you developed, that you built, that you
Yep.
found,
Yep.
and maybe they'll get a referral every now and then. But if they're doing that and they're generating some revenue over and beyond what's there, how would you suggest compensating them? So
Right.
two questions.
Right. It's a good question. So how do we compensate, that advisor, that second gen service advisor? I mean, look, we want them to find money within, and they should find money. The greatest thing about giving these smaller files to these advisors is they find money, because when I find myself on a call with a $500,000 client, I want to get off that call as fast as I can, because I know that I shouldn't be on this call. This is not a good use of my time. For them, they're digging in. And so what ends up happening is they're asking questions and they're more engaged than I probably was, because I didn't have time. I'm rushing through. That's just something I have to get through, where they're going to spend an hour or a half an hour with that client. And when you spend time and you ask questions and you're engaged, you find money. So there's no doubt. We want to incentivize these people to find money. So the way we compensate, if someone's running a book, let's say they're running $150 million for me, I'll pay them 15% on that book. My clients, I pay them 15%. How do I protect myself from them eventually with those relationships? Very, very strong agreements. You got to be smart about your agreements, though. There are no non-competes anymore in most states, certainly not in New Jersey, in the New York metropolitan area. But you can have non-solicitation agreements, and you can build in penalties that they have to buy those clients if they take them. And so you want to make sure that you have an attorney that's very familiar with our space, and you draft an ironclad agreement. And if they won't sign it, don't hire them. So the way we compensate, once we get past the idea of protecting, is it's 15% to service. And, look, if you give somebody 150 million, 15%, it's a couple $100,000. My team does all the work. All they really have to do is just service. So it's not a bad gig. But what I do is I want to incentivize them to find money. So I'll give them 50% of the money they find in a one-time bonus. And then they're 15% again going forward on the flow. So if somebody can find $10 million, and if that represents, $1 million of gross revenue, obviously we use the net number, we take it against the grid and all that. But whatever that net number is, you know, uh, I'm willing to, pay a $50,000, bonus, and we do it quarterly as they bring money on. So we're happy to do that, because again, it's a reasonable cost to me and it incentivizes them, to look for money.
And then they get the 15% ongoing of that.
Correct.
So then
That's correct.
15% is
So
growing
if they
plus.
added, so if they added they added 100,000 revenue, they just picked up another $15,000 a year of annual income, plus the market growth. Because that AUM is growing. So we're calculating on the AUM that they're responsible for. So they also have, though, the incentive to keep the client, because if they lose $2 million, whatever that fee is, they just lost 15% of that revenue. So it's based on that revenue.
How do you view having that strong service advisor, that strong next gen advisor? How do you view that from a and I know we're going to talk about this at some point, but how do you view that from a standpoint of valuing your practice, your firm? What's
Yeah.
the mindset around that?
So now, I'm in an interesting situation because I spent 40 years as an advisor. The last 5 years I spent, or maybe 6 years, I spent as the really, really attractive, gal sitting at the bar where everybody wanted to buy me a drink. And then 18 months, which now I know how it feels. I never knew how it felt. So congratulations to you beautiful women out there who get to go to the bar and have everybody come up and want to buy you a drink. It must be a nice way to live. And then about 18 months ago, obviously, we took on a minority partner with Rise Growth Partners. They've been fantastic. Um, and so, and so I kind of understand how value is created, what's important. The most important the value creator, what makes something worth more, a greater multiple, something that people are willing to pay for first and most important is organic growth. And organic growth means your ability not to acquire or buy practices, not to keep bringing on, advisors that you're paying for, but you can actually grow, assets inside your book with your clients and prospects and referrals. That's the most important. But also inorganic growth, being able to demonstrate inorganic growth at the institutional level. It's the idea of having a scalable business. We have 220 people. We've built a scalable business. So what's important for the 60-year-old that thinks that they're going to sell their business, and they're going to come to me and say, Andy, I want to join One Point. I want you to buy my business and I want to be part of your firm. Well, what we're looking at is, what is the sustainability long-term of this business? And if this is a person with two assistants and they're all by themselves and no one's ever talked to a client, it's a little less attractive, especially if they want to get out soon. That multiple's less. If they've got next gens and they're all set, then that's much more attractive, because what everybody's concerned about is keeping those clients. If I'm going to buy your clients, I have to believe I can keep them. And if I have, next gens in there, and we also want to make sure we compensate those next gens, we want to make sure they're happy, that there's opportunity for them. And so that's really important from a value standpoint. We have to, an acquirer has to know that business is going to be long-term, sticky, business that they're buying, not the lead or the main advisor that they're dealing with is this fantastic personality, charisma, smart, and there's nothing behind them, because that's like anything. The key man risk there is too great. Yeah, so it's to our benefit to be building teams opposed to it being all about us, and that's really important too, because when you spend the time with this with this next gen advisor for that 12-month period, it's very difficult. You've been the main actor on that stage your whole career, and now you're on a call with clients, and again, big clients. You've got to learn to let them run the meeting. We have to be humble enough and patient enough. And just, it's so hard. I bite my tongue all the time, like, Andy, shut up, just let her run the meeting, and it's harder than you think. But we have to do that because we have to give the client the confidence that, oh, she's running the meeting. Andy's there, but she's running the meeting. And let her answer the questions and try to pump her up. Like I always say, listen, the reason she's with us because she's way smarter than me. and we always just want to provide better service and take as good a care of our clients as we can. And when I can find somebody as smart as Lexus, we bring them on. So, the team has just gotten better. You have me and you have her and everybody else in our team, but we want to pump them up. We don't need to pump ourselves up.
So you're at you and I were on a call yesterday, and I said, where are you now? And you said a little over 2.3 billion. 2.3 billion.
It's my side
40
hustle.
What's that?
That's my side hustle.
Yeah, exactly. When you think back over the last 40 plus years, what would you do differently, knowing what you know now, related to lead advisors? And this is more geared towards, again, we've got two groups that listen to us, arguably three, but we've really been talking to the 50 plus. Talk to the 30, 40-year-old today that's successful, that's got a good business. What would you do differently as it relates to that next gen or that lead advisor?
Yeah, I would probably have that really smart, thoughtful service advisor on every call from the beginning, assuming I'm a grower, assuming that I'm somebody that's the capability to go out and really, find money. I would have that person on from the very, very beginning, because one, it makes my life easier. When I get off a call now, I can go to my next call. I don't have to worry about, what just happened, because she's on the call. Everything's being recorded by Zox. The team all gets the notes. Everybody knows what the follow-ups are. And it's her responsibility to do that. And I trust her. I would have done that a long time ago because it just would have made my life so much easier, and if I can make my life easier, free up time, that just means I have the ability to go out and find more money, so that is something that I would have done. I would have embraced that earlier. I mean, I've had, second gen, advisors for the last, 10 or 12 years, but I thought of it more as the B's and C's, not the A's. And then one thing I would do now is I would, and I do it now. And I would have done it sooner. It just makes life easier, and it gives me an opportunity to do other things. And it gives me an opportunity to actually help run, the firm that we're running. Yeah.
And I'm assuming I mean, based on that answer, that's good advice for 30, 40 something year old plus the 50, 60-year-old, regardless of where you are. That's what you would do differently.
Yeah. So for the 30s and 40-year-olds, just don't fall into the trap that you're going to depend on other people to not only run your business, but to find your money, because I think it's a trap. And if it doesn't work, you wake up someday and you're like, wow, what happened? Not only do I not even really have great relationships with these people because I let somebody else do that, but I'm not growing my business either, because we want them to find money. We want them to grow our business. Everybody would love to. It would be more like a manufacturing business, right? The machines are running all day. I'm just upstairs. I'm counting the money. I'm doing the financing. I'm being the CEO. I'm being the boss. If you can do it, great. But I think it's very, very difficult to find the right personnel for that. So don't fall into that trap. Do it, for the idea that you're leveraging, but you still have to be the rainmaker if you want to really build, I think, a big successful practice. Because if these people are truly rainmakers, they don't want to work for somebody else. And if they're willing to work with you, it's only a matter of time before not only do you have to, basically they're your partners and you're going to give up equity. And I would say also a big mistake people make is they give up equity to these employees. And I love my employees and we pay them really well. And I gave 10% of my equity away, 10%, which will be tens of millions of dollars. I gave away to my team when we did our deal. Because the thing that excites me the most about whatever will happen someday in the future isn't how wealthy I will be, because I was fine to start. It's how much money these guys will get, how it's going to change their lives, because they've helped me build this. And I'm grateful to them and I love them and it's great. But with that said, I don't want to be held hostage, and the equity in these firms was very valuable. And the one mistake I find people making is they give away 10, 20, 30% to these junior advisors, even to some staff people, before they recognize and go to market. And then all of a sudden they realize, oh my goodness, I just gave away. They thought that, they wanted to be fair. They wanted to keep everybody, but you just gave away millions and millions of dollars. Should have given away something, but maybe not much. So yeah, that's how I would look at that.
That's an interesting question, because I speak to guys that are giving away equity to junior partners or the next gen. What would you do instead? Because you think about it, you give that equity away in the first 3 or 4, 5 years, and that I mean, marriage is in later than that. What's an alternative to make sure they're fairly compensated,
Yeah. I
but
think it's always,
avoid?
look, we always want to, so how do we keep them if we don't give them equity? Again, if you have hunters, real hunters, it's going to be very difficult. But if they're real hunters and they really bring in money, and if they can bring as much money as you do, then I would argue that it's fine to give away equity because the pie is getting bigger. The problem is when we give equity away or we sell equity, but they don't have any money. So we end up selling equity very cheap. We call it sweat equity. We want to be generous. We want everyone to have skin in the game. The problem though is that, if the pie is not really growing or it's not growing because of them, it maybe it's growing because of me. I just give it away. Now, so what I'd rather do is I'd rather incentivize them with money because money's cheap. Equity is expensive. I mean, we do acquisitions and we might be buying practices that could be 20, 30, 40, 50, $60 million valuations. Somebody gives away 20 or 30% on a $30 million, that was $9 million. Say, well, how much did you sell that for? $2 million, right? I mean, that's the kind of valuations that they sell these things. These things are valuable. So I would say I want to pay them more money than anybody else will pay them so that they're kind of stuck with me. And we've always done that. Look, my chief of staff is almost a 7-figure guy. He's never found he has to try not to find clients because he's smart as hell. I love him. I couldn't have built this business without him. And if he's brought in 2 clients in the last, 25 years, it's a lot. I mean, I'm almost thinking like, my God, doesn't anyone ever ask you what you do? Doesn't anyone ever say, hey, and what do you like refer them to other people? Like who are you referring them to? Because we're not getting up, right? But, with that said though, he makes more money than 80%, 70% of the advisors here do. And, and so he's not going anywhere and he's been really loyal and he feels like he's really fairly treated. Now he's got equity because we had equity to give. It's something that was actually monetizable, but I'd rather pay them, really well. Just be careful about that equity because that equity could be very valuable someday. And you just want to be, I've had conversations with people, they've given away so much equity early because they were sort of desperate. They gave away the equity. They felt, and they wake up one day and they realize they have an enterprise and they've already given away 40 or 50% of it. And that is really unfortunate. So be very careful about that equity.
I think 2 more questions and then we'll wrap this one up. First question would be, how does the advisor determine which clients to transition to first? And then the second piece, not the second question, but the second piece of that would be how do you train them along the way as lead advisor?
Yeah. So so it's a good question. How do we determine who we sort of transition first or early? And then the second is, how do we train these people? Like like yesterday, I'm on a call with Lex and, the individual had some insurance, a financial guy. On the first call, he made it very clear to me, not interested in permanent insurance. The existing insurance is 20-year level. So we come back with 30-year level, young guy. And with the idea that, I can try to maybe convert that coverage over time if it makes sense. If not, it doesn't matter to me. But I said to Lex, listen, this is really important. The way you win business, there's a couple of ways you win business. And it's not about return and it's not about criticizing the assets they have. It's about conversations around structure. So there were a few structural, conversations. One was, why would you have a 20-year level term when you're 35 years old if you don't believe in permanent insurance? At least get a 30-year level term. Or maybe think of like a really skinny down UL contract you can keep forever because that coverage is going to run out and it's going to be really expensive if you can get it. And he's like, yeah, wow, you're right. So for an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a year. And again, I'm really more interested in getting his assets. The other conversation was, why in the world is that not a trust? There's no value. You make money, you're going to be a wealthy guy someday. And then we talked about, his wife has a 1099 she has 1099 income. So, let's talk about, some kind of qualified plan where we could put more money away. again, these are things they might or might not do. It doesn't matter to me. It's inconsequential because I want the $10 million. That's what I want. And we talked about the 10 million, but those are the conversations you have. So when we're done the call, I say to Lex, okay, so what was the most important thing about the call today? And it wasn't that our private credit might pay a little bit more or have a little less risk or durations on their bond portfolio or that we have, metals in our portfolio that are up 80% this year and our global multi-asset strategy is up 30 and, isn't that great since it takes a third of the risk of the market? Those aren't the important points of the conversation. It's sort of the planning conversation, things that other people aren't talking about. And they have to learn because, she came from, Morgan Stanley. That was not their conversation. It was always an investment conversation. And so we've got to take the time to teach them. And eventually, and that's why, we'll spend at least, we've been a year together now in this internship, and she's learning and learning and learning. And, but yeah, we have to pay attention to what's going on. And then we have to point out to them where we thought the inflection point was. What was the winning message? What was the reason that client decided to join us? And it was probably something that we pointed out, something to do with their planning. They want to know. And the reason it's important is because even if that thing wasn't like earth shattering, what they're thinking in the back of their mind, there could be something in the future that could be really, really important. And I don't think the person I'm working with now is looking at that. I think these guys will. I want to know that there's somebody that's looking at all these detail things that aren't so obvious. So I don't have to worry about it because I don't have the time to deal with it and I don't understand it anyway. And that's always where the business is won, I believe.
So what I heard you saying is take the time, which most advisors are running with their hair on fire.
Exactly.
And so the idea of taking time after a meeting to recap, to ask questions, to do that investment of time and energy is very important. That's going to help us create more patience. Because if you're not patient with these people, they're not going to learn.
And
right?
and I think also, right. And also, I think that the problem is we make the assumption that everybody knows what we know. They don't. If you've spent 10 or 20 or 30 years doing this, I've spent 40. There is such a wealth of knowledge that you think is so basic. It is so rudimentary, but it's not. And so we just assume that everybody gets the joke. They don't. It took us decades to get all of that information, understand it, recognize it, see when it's important. So we have to be able to teach it. And so, yeah, we have to be teachers. They are, and if they're not coachable, teachable, whatever, then they're just not the right person for us.
Perfect segue into the last question I had, which was if you're looking for that person today, like our listeners are, where would you suggest that they find that person? How do you multi-point question? Where should they find them? How do they know if it's the right person? And then how do they know if it's the wrong person? And what should they do?
Sure. I mean, it's a great question. So who is the candidate for these next gen jobs? How do we find them? What's the right personality? We do assessments here, so because for all employees that we hire, whether they're advisors, whether they're on the management team, whether they're staff, because we want to know are they, we attribute personality assessments to animals. Are they lions? Are they beavers? Are they golden retrievers? One, because we want to understand how do we communicate with these people, so that we can understand sort of their behavior. Because lions behave differently than otters, behave differently than golden retrievers. It's kind of like the big joke around here. Oh, I get it. Yeah, he's a lion. Yeah, I understand now. I'm not going to be offended by that. I would say that if you're in a big office somewhere, whether it's a broker dealer or a wirehouse, if there's smart people that just aren't hunters, and they're not making it. They're sort of struggling. They've been around for a long time, but they just can't quite make a go of it. That can be an interesting, person to take. If they're smart and they're thoughtful, it doesn't do you any good to hire somebody that isn't smarter than you, that doesn't have the skills that you don't have. So for someone like me to hire somebody that isn't super technologically, advanced and smart, which all of these kids are. So that's easy, for me, but also really understands markets, really smart, has a skill set that, that I don't have. So that's really important. There's lots and lots of people that work at lots of different institutions, that are, not really being paid very well, working really hard. If you can find CFPs, CFAs, just people that, they're smart and can communicate with clients. And they have to be good communicators, which means you have to be a good listener. And then you have to be able to explain things simplistically, not, people that go on and on and on and really complicated because, clients they just want it simple, right? Because when you start to talk over their heads, it makes them very uncomfortable. And I don't think they appreciate it because all you do is make them feel stupid. And nobody wants to have conversations all the time with someone that makes them feel stupid, right? Doesn't make you feel good at the end of a conversation. So we want to make sure that they're people that can talk in a very simplistic, clear way and be very respectful, to clients. So, but, there's lots and lots of, and look, today, we have an HR person that, you can go to recruiters, you can put them out on, on LinkedIn, you can put it out on, all the different, and people are everywhere. We have not found it to be difficult, to find lots and lots of qualified candidates. Again, if you're willing to pay them and teach them and have patience with them and have a good culture, have a good culture. Look, we always say when we bring advisors on, there's three things that must be true or we don't want to bring them on. And the first thing we always say is they have to be happy. And the same thing with employees. If we're going to bring an employee on, yep, we want it to be a good place for them to work and have advancement so that they're well paid and they've got a future. But most importantly, we want them to be happy. And if they're not going to be happy in that role, then I don't want them because they shouldn't be here. And whether they can do the job or not, it's not really relevant. But yeah.
And how quickly would you, if the person's not right, how would you know they're not right? And how quickly would you get rid of that
great question.
person?
I would say for all things in your business, the one thing we've learned is hire slow. Problem with most advisors is we're so impatient. We're in such a hurry. We feel desperate. We got to get somebody, hire slow, fire fast. If you bring somebody in and you're like, I don't think this is going to work, your gut is usually right. And the longer it takes, the harder it is, the worse you feel, the worse it is for them. You're not doing somebody a favor if you don't think that they're going to make it to keep them around because you want to be fair and give them enough time so that you can feel good about getting rid of them. That doesn't serve anybody's purpose. At the same time, don't be impatient. Talk to lots of people. We'll never hire anybody for a job here that we don't at least talk to like 6 candidates. Because the problem is you talk to me, oh yeah, this will be awesome because you need somebody and you're feeling desperate. But you don't even know if they're the right candidate because it's just the one candidate you've talked to. Then when you talk to another candidate, you're like, well, this candidate's better than that candidate. So I'm glad I didn't hire them. And then you talk to 6 candidates and somewhere along the line, you find the most qualified person. So yeah, most important, if you're building a business, hire slow, fire fast.
Great advice. Great advice. Well, hey, another great episode, Andy. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing. Thank you all to our listeners for being here on the Advisor's Compass. And if this was beneficial, give it a like, share it with someone, another advisor who you think would benefit from hearing this. And hopefully you were able to get something today that will help you build your business, impact your clients, and build your legacy. And we appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.
Herein referred to as 1 Point BFG. 1 Point BFG is not affiliated with Advisor Compass. Chuck Downs is not affiliated with 1 Point BFG, nor compensated by 1 Point BFG. The opinions expressed by Andy Schwartz are my own personal views and experiences as an investment advisor representative. The information contained herein is provided for informational and discussion purposes only and is not and may not be relied on in any manner as legal, tax, accounting, or regulatory advice, nor does it constitute an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities and may not be used or relied upon in connection with any offer or sale of securities. The information, as set forth herein, should not be construed or interpreted as 1 Point BFG's guarantee of any particular investment outcome or a guarantee of future investment returns or results.